Welcome to Office 2016 video number 39. Hey, in this video, we got to talk about Access 2016 and see how to create a database, import an Excel table, create a table from scratch, including adding all the data validation data types and field properties, create a form that allows us to test our database, and of course, build relationships between the two tables. Here are all of our steps. Create the database, import from Excel, create this table, including all the raw data at the end, but making sure that each one of our fields have the proper data types and field properties so we only get the raw data into the database that meets our requirements. We'll also see how to use the Lookup wizard for a field to create a one-to-many relationship. And of course, at the end, we'll create a form and use that form to test every single one of our rules to assure that our raw data is good data, not bad data. Now, before we start this video, let's go over to our class website. Just click on the link below the video. You need to download that Excel file that has a table we're going to import. And if you haven't been downloading the PDF files for all 39 videos in this class, you have been missing out. If I click on this PDF, you can read it here or download it or print it. There are 25 pages in this PDF file that detail each one of the steps in this video. I'm going to click the back button. Now, download that Excel file, and then we have to create a blank Access database. Now, I already have the icon on my taskbar. If you don't, go to the Start menu, search for Access 2016, and then add it to the taskbar here and open it. I'm going to go ahead and click on the red A and watch what happens when we open up Access. Well, the first thing it's going to do is going to ask us, hey, do you want to do one of these templates? We don't want to do that. We want to create our database as a blank database. So I'm going to click on this icon. And this is the thing that's different than Excel and Word. We actually have to save it to a location and give the file a name. Then click Create, which means we actually have to have it saved on our computer before we ever start. Now, as we talked about last video, raw data is automatically saved. So that's one of the reasons that we just up front have to create, name our database, and give it a location before we do anything. All right, the first thing we do, click that folder button, which allows us to browse. We're going to browse to our Highline folder. Particular quarter, I'm in fall 2017. You might be in a different quarter, but then Business 216 video files, and there's our 05 Access. Now, database 2, that's the file name, but we'll change that in just a moment. All we've done is we've pointed Access to the location where we want to save our database. When I click OK, all it did was put the file path in. Now, we could have created the name in that last dialog box, but now we can come here, and we're going to call this Wooden Crafts Database.accdb, Access Database. That's our file extension. So we've given it a location and a name. Now we can click Create, and we're opening up a blank Access database. Now, it's really not blank because it actually creates a blank table. Now, this is the table that we'll create from scratch, but we're going to do that later. So I want to Control S, and I want to name this table Products, and Enter. Now, this entire project, we are going to create a simple database where we have products that we're selling, and then we're going to have a second table of all of the suppliers that we buy the products from. Now, our project here is creating a small database for a kiosk in a mall. And that kiosk sells small wooden toys. So we'll come back later to our products table, create all the data types and field properties for each one of our fields, enter the raw data, which will be our toys for our kiosk in the mall, and then work forward in our database. Now, I'm going to close this, and we want to learn something about Access. there is the X all the way at the top, which will close the entire database. And the X right here closes the object. As we talked about last video, we're going to have 4 different objects: tables, queries, forms, and reports. Now, anytime we have an object open, which we have here, we can see the name of the object over here. This table is called products. I can also see that it's open, and it lists the name of the table right here in the tab. This is an object, so we always want to come over to the lower X when we want to close it and click that X to close it. Now, our next step is to import an Excel table that has our supplier data. Now, we can go look at our Excel file, and we see that we have a table here, a proper data set, supplier code, first name, last name, and a bunch of other fields. We want to import this table from Excel. I'm going to close this and go back to Access. This is often the case that we want to build a database, and we already have data over in Excel. External Data tab, over to Import and Link, New Data Source. I click the drop-down From File, and there it is. I'm going to click on Excel. Now, this dialog box wizard will step us through a number of steps. First, we want to click Browse and browse to our location. And it's in my 05 Access. And there it is, V39 supplier data from Excel. Double click. Now, we want to import the source data into a new table in the current database. So that's the correct dialog button. Now, I click OK. This will open up our first step of our wizard. Show worksheets, that's what we're doing. We only have one, and it's already selected, so I come down and click Next. The next step, As. Does our first row contain column headings or field names? Yes, it does. So I check, and I can see that preview down here. Now I click Next. Now we could go through and click and change certain data types and properties, but I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to do that over in Access. So I'm simply going to click Next. Now this is important. I want to choose my primary key, that first column of the lookup table, which will assure that I have no duplicate. So I'm going to choose my own primary key, supplier code. That means this is our primary key. There's exactly one AP code. So all of the raw data for AP gets contained in exactly one record. All right, now I'm going to click Next. That is a fine name for our table. I'm going to come down and click Finish. We do not need to save our import step, so I'm going to click Close. And there's our supplier data table. Now, let's go ahead and double-click this object in the navigation pane. I'm actually going to click and drag this edge so we see it says All Access Objects. I'm going to double-click this object. We can see the supplier data name is in the navigation pane, and it's in the tab above the object. Now, we can see the data that was imported from Excel, and we can see that each field has a name. What we really want to do is go underneath into Design View and add data types and field properties for each one of our fields. Now, a couple things we want to notice. Supplier code, this is the primary key. And our rule for supplier codes is please only enter 2 letters, and they must be capitalized. Over here, same rule for state. Over here for zip code and telephone, we're actually going to add something called an input mask to display these in the proper format. It will be similar to number formatting. And we will have to type the code in for each one of these fields to display it with the proper input mask. Now, to go underneath and look at Design View, we come up to the Views ribbon tab. Click the drop-down Data Sheet View. That's where you see the raw data. Design View, that's where you change data types and field properties. Now, as we talked about last video, the fields are listed vertically. Then you have your data types, and down here are the field properties. Even when we're in Design View, you still have the object name at the top, and of course, it's over in the navigation pane. And once we add our data types and field properties, we can use Control-S at any time to save this. And if we ever want to close, we can use that X over here, whether we are in Design View or Data Sheet View. Now our first field, that's our primary key. Notice, because in the wizard we designated this as a primary key, there's a little icon that shows a key. The primary key button in the Tools group in the Design ribbon tab is also highlighted. Now, data type. For supplier code, we're going to use short text. Now, when I click here and click the drop down, and on page 6 and 7 in the PDF notes, there are detailed notes about each one of these data types. There are also notes about our code for our input mask, again on page 6 and 7 in our PDF notes. Short text, that's up to 255 characters. Long text, that's when you have more than 255. Number. Number is really important. When we get to units on hand or cost, we have to designate it as a number, or we're not allowed to do calculations or formulas with numbers. Large number, that has a range from -2 to the 63rd power all the way to 2 to the 63rd power. We're not going to have any large numbers. Date and time, if it's a date and time, you have to designate it. Currency will have 4 decimals of precision if we choose, and it will format it as a currency. Auto number, that is when you want to increment 1, 2, 3, 4 as you add new records. Sometimes people use auto numbers for the primary key. Yes, no, that means you only get to enter yes or no. This kind of field is great. If you have your own personal database for contacts with names, telephone numbers, emails, addresses, you might be getting married, and you have a column that says, yes, I'm sending them an invitation, no, I'm not. Then it would be easy to simply ask the database, please give me all the addresses and names for yes. Object linking, that's like when you have external objects, hyperlinks, attachments. Calculated, we're never going to do that in a table. We'll do that in a query. And then Lookup Wizard, we'll see how to do that when we need to look up a particular item from a different table. All right, we're going to do short text. So data type short text. Now, we always want to leave a description that says what is happening with this particular field. Right, we're going to type primary key, and the rule 2 capital letters. And this will be used as the foreign key in the product table for lookup. Now we have our field name, data type, and description. Now we come down to field properties. We have field size. We're going to make sure that this is only 2 characters. Tab. I'm going to delete that format tab. And the input mask, we're going to have to learn a little bit of code. We're going to go over to page 7 in our PDF notes. Now, for an input mask, if you put a 0, that means it's a digit 0 to 9, and entry is required. 9, digit or space entry, not required. If we come down, capital L means letter A to Z, entry required. Question mark means letter A to Z, entry optional. And down here, we can either make letters lowercase or uppercase. So we're going to use greater than symbol causes all the characters to be converted to uppercase. Now we're going to combine, and down in input mask, I'm going to say greater than LL. That means if we type in lower or uppercase, it doesn't matter. It'll always show up as uppercase. That's the greater than symbol. LL means 2 letters are required. And we'll test this later. Now notice this is a primary key up here. So it says required, yes. Indexed, that's something that happens behind the scenes to help querying occur more quickly. But notice it says no duplicates. All right, so our first field, field name, data type description, and our field properties. Now we're going to come up and do our next field, first name. The data type, short text is fine. The description, I'm going to type first name of contact. And then down here, all we need to do is we're going to limit this to 25 characters. Now we can go to last name. The data type is short text. That's fine. I'm going to type something like last name of contact. Field size, 25, tab. And for format, I'm not going to have anything, so I delete. Now let's come up to address. Short text is fine. We're never going to have more than 255 characters. If we did, we'd have to do long text, something like address of supplier. I'm going to put field size 100 tab and get rid of any format. Now city, short text is fine. City of supplier, we're going to limit this to 50 field size. We come up to state. Short text is fine. State of supplier. Now we can come down here. The field size is going to be 2 tab. I'm going to delete, and the input mask will be the same for our primary key. Greater than, that means all capitals. LL, that means 2 letters required. Now zip code. We are not going to leave this as number. It imported as a number, but we don't need to keep it as a number. Zip codes and telephone numbers are examples of numbers, but we're never going to do mathematical calculations. So we're going to store it as short text. Zip code of supplier. Now we're going to come down to field size. It's going to be 9 tab, delete tab. And our input mask, well, we always want the first 5 numbers for sure. So we're going to use 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we always want a dash. And we could follow the rule for text, which is anytime you have text, you put it in double quotes. But there is a special character, and it is backslash. If you put a backslash, that says whatever character follows should be displayed. So I'm going to backslash and then put a dash. That means a dash will always be displayed. And then 1, 2, 3, 4 nines, because 9 means number, but it's not required. Now let's come up to telephone. We want to have short text. Phone of supplier, we're going to come down here and have field size 10, tab, tab. And the input mask, well, we always want to start with an open parentheses, but that's a character. So I'm actually going to say backslash and then open parentheses. Backslash is when you have a single character you want to display. Now we want to require an area code, so 3 zeros. Then I need a close parenthesis and a space. That's more than 1 character, so I have to put it in double quotes. Close parenthesis, space, and double quotes. Then I need 1, 2, 3 numbers required. Then I need a dash, backspace, dash, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that will be our input mask for a telephone number. Now I'm going to Control S. And this message is saying some data may be lost because we added a bunch of rules. This is a generic message, and if we're sure we're not going to lose any data, we can click Yes. Now we can go look. Click our Data Sheet View button, and there it is. We don't see anything different here, but later we'll test this. But over here, there's our dash, and there's our parentheses, space, and dash. Those are called input masks. Now we could try to come here, backspace, backspace, and I'm going to try to type a number. That won't let us. I'm going to type little t, and look at that. It comes out capital. Now I'm going to backspace, backspace, escape, because I don't want to add any record. Later, when we get to our products table, we'll have rules for each column, and we'll test all of those. Now we can close this. If it asks us to save, we can say yes. We finish our supplier data. Now we need to go add data type and field properties to our product table. Now instead of double clicking and then going to view, you can simply right click the table and say design view. This will open it up in design view. Now it already added an auto number for us, and we don't want that. So I'm going to click on the row header, right click, delete rows. It's going to ask us, are you sure? We're going to say yes. Now our first field is our primary key. And before we do anything, let's go look at our PDF notes. Here's page 14. We can see the rule for our product ID. Well, it looks like it always has to be 4 characters. It always has to start with 2 letters. They have to be capital. Then it has to have 2 numbers. Description, that'll be some text. We'll have some 25 character limit. On hand, that will be a number. Cost, we're actually going to add a rule here that says the cost can never be more than $500. Then we'll have sell price. We'll have supplier code. Since this is actually from the primary key in the supplier data table, we'll do a lookup to that other table. Then because we have a column called wholesale or retail that will only get 2 values, we'll do a lookup and create our own list. So this column can only get 1 of 2 values. All right, let's go back to our design view products table. Field name, product ID, tab. Short text is fine, tab. Now I'm going to type out the description. Product ID, primary key, rule for PK, primary key, 2 capital letters and 2 numbers. All right, now we have to bring this rule into the database by coming down to field properties. Field size, we're going to have field size 4, tab, tab. Now, 2 letters, 2 numbers required, and we always want capital. So we're going to start with greater than LL for 2 letters required, 00 for 2 numbers required. All right, we're set for product ID, except this is the primary key. Now, notice down here, required no, indexed duplicates OK. Let's right-click primary key right at the top, or we can click the primary key button up at the top. Now, we see a little key icon there, and down here we see required yes, index no duplicates. All right, now let's go to our second field. This is going to be description tab. Short text is fine, tab. Description of product is fine. Now, there actually is a keyboard to jump down to the bottom. It's F6, so I can F6. Field size is highlighted, 25. Now, if you create your database and later this isn't good enough, you come down to Design View and change it. I remember the first time in the early 90s, I didn't know anything about Design View or anything, and I had a database. And I couldn't type what I wanted because there wasn't enough characters. Well, someone later told me you just go down to Design View and change the number of characters. All right, so 25, we can change that later. All right, now on hand tab, that's got to be a number. Now, look at that. That is misspelled. If I misspell the field name here, I'm going to have to misspell it everywhere else. We definitely want to spell it correct, or at least use that incorrect name everywhere else. I'm going to type on hand tab. Now, this is a number of units on hand, so we want to change the data type to number. Now we're allowed to do calculations on this field, like multiply on hand times cost to get inventory value. Tab. Number of units on hand available to sell to customers. Now, we can look down here. Field size now talks about certain number types. Long number is the default, and that is fine for us. Now, let's come up to field name. Our next column is cost, tab. Now, here's a cool trick. We know we can use the drop-down, but currency starts with C. So watch this. I can simply, after hitting tab, type the letter C, and that data type will pop up. And that's what we want. We want it as a number with up to 4 digits and formatted as currency. Cost of product, but this can never be more than $500. Now, if that's one of our rules, we have to build it into our database. So we're going to come down to field properties. Currency is fine. And we want to come down to validation rule. Now, this is a logical rule that will evaluate to true and false, just as we saw over in Excel. And it's actually going to involve an AND logical test. We don't want to enter numbers that are negative, and we don't want any numbers greater than or equal to 500. So we're going to build an AND logical test. It's got to be both greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to 500. Now, the way we do that is we type greater than or equal to 0. Now, remember, over in Excel, we thought of this construction as the greater than symbol is pointing towards all of the data. So it means all of the numbers over there have to be greater than or equal to 0. Now, in Access. It's quite different than it is over in Excel. We might use the AND function or sum ifs. Here in Access, we can actually type and tells this validation rule that this is an AND logical test. So whatever follows also has to be true. It has to be less than or equal to 500. Now, these are actual numbers, so the number that we enter into our field will be compared to both of these, and it has to pass both tests. And we'll test it later. We'll try and break this rule. Now, the next field, this field property is the error message that will pop up. So we're going to type, you can type whatever you want here. I'm going to type, I typed enter amount between 0 and 500. This is just text, so we're allowed to put dollar signs. By the way, if you put dollar signs up here, it won't work. Those just have to be straight numbers for our AND logical test. But that's the message that will pop up. All right, let's come up. The next field is sell price, tab. C to get currency, tab. Selling price of product, and our field properties are fine. Now we have two more fields, and our next field is, yes, this is the information about the particular product, but we definitely need to know who we bought it from. So this is going to be supplier code tab. And this is where we want to look up a value. When we get to this field, when we're entering raw data, we want a drop-down arrow that has a list of all of the valid supplier codes from the primary key in that table right there, supplier data. So we're going to click the drop-down and go to Lookup Wizard. Now, step one, and we're actually going to see both of these, is what type of lookup? I want to look up a field to get values from another table or query. You betcha. I'm going to click Next. Which table do we want to look up and find our code? Supplier data. Click Next. Now, this is a list of all the fields in that supplier data. We select it. Then the single arrow I click, it takes it from available fields and brings it over to selected fields. Now we have our field that we can pick values from and dump them into our products table. Click Next. I don't have to sort, but I'm going to sort by supplier code ascending. Click Next. It gives us our list. We could adjust the column if we wanted. Click Next. That is a fine name for a label. We could check this here. This would enforce referential integrity, but we're not going to do that. I'm going to leave that, and we're actually going to do it in the relationship windows later. Because guess what? When I click Finish, it's going to create a relationship, just like we saw over in Excel when we had a lookup table and a sales table. We're going to have a one side and a many side. The product side is the many side because we can list the same supplier code many times. The supplier data table is the one side because we can only have a particular supplier listed once. Now I'm going to click Finish, and it will ask me, table must be saved before creating a relationship. I'm going to say yes, please save it. Now, look at that. It shows short text instead of lookup. It's short text. And it actually took the field size from that other table and listed it there. We're going to very carefully list a good description to say what is going on here. So we typed lookup to supplier data table to get primary key supplier code. In this table, it is called a foreign key. That means the primary key from the other table is sitting in our table. All right, now we have one last field, and we're going to have a field for our toy products that says whether we sell this retail or wholesale. So we're going to call this wholesale retail tab, and we're going to use the lookup wizard again. Select that, but this time we're going to select, I will type the values that I want. Click Next. Column 1, that's fine. I'm simply going to type wholesale tab and retail. I better spell it right here. Now I have my two entries. I click Next. Now that's a fine label. I want to select Limit to List. That means I only want to allow those two values in this column. Now I can come and click Finish. And again, we'll test both of those drop downs there. All right, we're going to add a description. Wholesaler retail lookup, not to another table, just to a list we typed in. Now we can limit this to whatever we want. It's going to be those two values only. All right, so we have completed our products table. We listed our fields, listed the data types, listed the descriptions, and added our field properties. We are building a table that's going to hold raw data, data type, field properties. Those are going to prevent bad data from getting into our table. Now we need to save it. Control S. And if we go up to Views, View button, that's the Data Set View button. I simply click, and we can see that there are no records because we haven't entered any raw data. Now I'm going to close this products table. We have our two tables. Now before we get into our raw data into products, we actually need to go look at the relationship between products and supplier data. We go up to Database Tools, Relationship Group, click the Relationship button. Now, supplier data, supplier code is the one side. Over here in the products table, well, of course, we can have many listings of supplier code. For example, we can buy many products from SC supplier. So we can list SC many times. So we want to enforce a one-to-many relationship. Not only that, but we don't want anything entered in this table unless it's already in our supplier data table. So we can edit this relationship line. Now, it's kind of hard. You don't want to right-click out in the gray. You want to hover right over the relationship line, right-click. And when you see Edit Relationship, you can edit the relationship. Now, here's the dialog box for editing the relationship. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that the supplier code entered here is in the supplier data table. So we check Enforce Referential Integrity. That just means that from now on, we're not allowed to enter anything in supplier code and products table unless it's already in supplier data. Now, these two options down here we are not going to use. If you choose Cascade Delete Related Records, that means if you delete supplier code from this table, it would delete all the products. Cascade Update Related Fields means if I change the supplier code over here, it will automatically change them over in the products table. But all we want is enforce referential integrity. Then we only get supplier codes from supplier data table. Click OK. And then we see we have a one-to-many relationship set of icons. One, that's the one side. The infinity symbol, that's the many side. Now we need to save this, so Control S, and up in Relationship Tools Design, we can click the Close button. Now we need to create two forms, one for each table. Our forms allow us to enter data, look at data, edit, and delete data. Now we're going to click on the Products table, go up to Create, over to the Forms group, Form button, click. This gives it to us in Layout View. Over in Views, I can click the drop-down. Layout View allows us to change column widths and things like that. If we're going to enter raw data, we have to be in Form View. So I clicked on Form View. Now I want to save this before we enter raw data and test all of our data types and field properties. Control S. It's going to suggest the same name as the table, which is fine. In fact, it's perfect. We want our form to have the same name, so I click OK. Now it adds a form group. I'm going to go over and close the form. Now I select Supplier Data, Create, Forms Group, Form. When I open this one, it already has raw data. Because this is the one side of a one-to-many relationship, that particular supplier will eventually have a list of products down here. Now we want to Control S. That's a perfect name. Click OK. Now I can close my form. If I were to double-click and open that up, it does come, when you double-click it, in the correct view for entering data. But make sure when you enter data or change data, it's in Form View. Now I'm going to close this form. And now we want to enter the raw data into the products table. But we're not going to use the table. We're going to use the form. So I double-click the form. I'm making sure it's in form view. Now, before we enter all of our raw data, we need to test every field and all of the rules that we've entered. Now, the raw data for this products table, if we go over to our PDF notes at our website, it's on page 24 there. It's on page 25 there. That's what the finished products table with all the raw data looks like. And it's on page 14. Alt-Tab. Now, product ID. Remember, 2 letters, capital, 2 numbers. So I'm going to try to type a number. Not going to let us do it. Now, the first product is Barnyard Friends, little wooden animals. And the product ID for that is BF01. So watch this. I'm going to type BF. It comes out capital even though I typed lowercase 01. Actually, before I do 01, let me try and break it by typing a letter. Not going to let us. Remember, we had 00 because we have 2 numbers that are required. So 01. Now, when we're entering records, we want to use tab to move to the next field. This is going to be Barnyard Friends. Whoops, I better spell it correctly. Barnyard Friends. And if I were to type a space, that's the 25-character limit. Again, we're testing every one of the fields. I'm using backspace. Tab on hand. I'm typing letters. If I hit tab, it's not going to let me enter those letters because that's supposed to be a number. Backspace. We have 3 Barnyard Friends on hand, so I type a 3 and tab. Notice it's already got the correct formatting for dollars for the cost field. Now remember, the cost field has a data validation rule. If I type -9, tab, I'm going to get that message that I typed in. Whatever you type down in our validation text, that's what's going to show up there. Now if I type 1000, tab, I get the same message. So it is working. I'm going to backspace. Now this product price is 27. Just like in Excel, we only type 27 and tab. The $, decimal, 00 will all automatically display. The sales price on this is 50. Tab. Now we have a drop down, and only the supplier codes from that primary key in our supplier data table are showing up. I'm going to select SC. Tab. We have a drop down here also. We can select whichever one we want. These are all retail. Now, we're in the last field in the first record. If you look down here, we can use the arrow to move forward. We can click New Record, but don't do that. If you're entering raw data, when you get to the last field, you simply hit Tab. That brings you to the first field in the next record. BL23 tab. I'm going to do this quickly because I got to show you one more trick down here. Blocks in box tab, 5 tab, 14.5, no 0, tab, 27 tab. Now this is the supplier AP, so all I have to do is type A. It shows up. I hit tab. R, retail shows up, tab. Now I'm at the beginning of the third record. Now I'm going to click pause and enter all this raw data. You do the same from page 24, 25, or 14 in the PDF notes. All right, so there is 10 of 10 records entered. If I come over and close this form, everything's saved automatically. This is a database. Raw data is saved automatically. Watch this. I'm even going to close the database. I'm going to open the database, and hopefully all the data is there. I'm going to go to the products table because the products table, and sure enough, there's all the raw data. Now make sure that you enter all of the raw data correctly because next video we'll talk about how to create queries. We'll create all sorts of different queries asking questions of this table and the supplier data table. All right, So in this video, we imported a supplier data table from Excel. Right-click, we went under to Design View and added data types, descriptions, and field properties to ensure that the data is good data. We then created a products table. Right-click Design. We typed out all the fields, data type, descriptions, and added all of our field properties. We added field properties and data types to fulfill the old cliche. The old cliche about databases is garbage in, garbage out. So because we have data types and field properties, we're preventing garbage from going into our database. That way, when we do our data analysis, converting raw data into useful information, we get good, useful information, not garbage. Close this table. We also created forms, this products forms. We entered our raw data and, of course, tested all of our data types and field properties. All right, if you like that video, be sure to click that thumbs up, leave a comment, and sub, because there's always lots more videos to come from Excel is Fun. Even though we're doing a few Access videos, we have 3 more Access videos, and the next one will be the most exciting of them all because we'll learn how to create queries in Access. All right, we'll see you next video.